museum. We don't have a building, but
Just
we are
walked in.
501.
Everybody have one of these?
And we have a dream of having a building and a museum. And we are in a transportation hub in Mojave. Two major state highways, State Highway 14 and 58. Two major railroads go through here, Burlington, Northern Santa Fe, and Union Pacific. It used to be Southern Pacific. But, and then the greatest airport in the world, spaceport. And so we've got it all. We've got the truck traffic, we've got cars, we've got airplanes, we've got trains, and rockets. Not many other places can say that. So we want to preserve that history. And this was a Marine Corps air station too during the war. And I'm sorry, honey, but I do love Marines. So anyway, today we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of the moonwalk, when Apollo 11 landed on the moon, and Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin were able to get out of Eagle and walk on the surface of the moon. So I thought, what better way than to have Dave Maston of Maston Space Systems and our friend Vinny Apicella come. He worked at NASA. He'll tell you all the other places he worked too, but he worked on Apollo 1 all through Apollo 7. It has lots of, all the stuff that you're holding in your hand. It was supposed to be a 10-page, you know, little information thing. I think it's 50 pages long. But you'll have the complete Apollo story. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Dave Maston, who came here. He is the founder and CEO of Maston Space Systems, and which came to Mojave in 2004. So they've been here for 15 years. And it's always fun to see him out there at the rocket site. And that used to be that way. But I always think of the rocket site at Edwards, but we have a rocket site here. It's kind of cool. But, and I remember watching one of his rockets, and it went up and went over and then landed on another pad. And I said, you know, we have a helipad in our front yard. You could just go up and fly over and land. And he thought maybe they wouldn't want to, you know, rocket flying over the houses. Probably not, but I thought it would be cool.
My house. You know, UPS,
yeah, right over your house.
Captain, UPS is going to be having drones flying over here,
Oh, that's,
delivering packages.
that's fine. I won't shoot them down. Anyway, I'm going to let Dave tell you the history of his business and what they're working on now. It's really exciting. They have a new thing with NASA, and we're going back to the moon and maybe Mars. So go backwards. Take it away, Dave.
So real quick, going to the moon, getting back to the moon. What we're talking about today. So some history, as we all know, 50 years ago, we actually put a person on the moon. 2 of them, as a matter of fact, and it was awesome. It was great. I don't remember it at all.
Oh, I do.
I do.
Oh, I do.
Yeah, I do.
Sorry, but I was completely irresponsible at that time. All I cared about was food and getting my diapers changed every once in a while.
What year were you born?
I was born in 1968. I was
Good year.
I was 10 months and 3 weeks old when Apollo 11
Your Dougie's age. You're just 51.
So, yeah, so it was great, it was wonderful, it was awesome. It left some problems, though. And by problems, I mean little things like we all came to understand and know that only large national governments of extremely economically stable
Yes.
countries could actually pull off such a thing, that it would require 5% or more of the federal budget to do it, aka billions of dollars. Nowadays it's almost getting close to $1 trillion. The belief, the knowledge that NASA is the forefront of everything technology happening.
Two seats here if you want.
And we also had that, came to understand, especially between Apollo 1 and Apollo 13, that astronauts are too valuable to actually risk. Can't actually risk being astronauts. And also that failure is just not an option. Fortunately, back around the change of the millennia, back around 2000 or so, there's a few of us decided that, those weren't necessarily all true. In fact, I think all of those were pretty much not true. But we had a lot of work to do. As you see, along with myself, NASA Space Systems, the center picture, we had Scale Composites, did the Spaceship 1 in 2004. Armadillo Aerospace, one of our competitors early on, was doing some work out in Texas for a number of years from roughly 2000 through 2010. Just right outside here, you can see a big, huge traffic cone, Roton rocket. And of course, we have Virgin Galactic and SpaceX currently pushing on. They're doing things better, less expensively, quicker. So yes, I think we're pretty much sure that now that you don't have to be a major national government to do anything in space. But at any rate, because of that belief, I started NASA Space Systems. We founded in 2004. We were up in Silicon Valley in Santa Clara. Is where we started off. We spent about 2 years developing our first engine up there. Of course, when you're at a place that's as crowded as the Silicon Valley, neighbors complain about the noise and about, hey, is that really safe? And so it became very difficult to actually do the testing that we needed to do. And so we started looking around, and we had some friends who were down here at the airport and said, hey, why don't you come down to Mojave Airport? Buildings are pretty cheap, wonderful land, and we'll even cheer you on when you go out to do a test.
Absolutely, absolutely. And nobody's going to complain about the noise.
So we moved down here, and sure enough, talking to everybody, worked out, safety. They're like, you tell us what you need. We're not going to give you permission. You just go out and do what you need to do, which is very important. Sort of a trust and respect between us that, hey, we're going to try to be as safe as we can, within reason, and they're going to allow us to do that. Allow us to make some mistakes and not worry too much about it, as long as we've done everything we could do to take care of the safety part. So for the next several years, from 2006 through 2009, we started developing a rocket, fully reusable. Actually ended up being 2 of them by 2009. And by fully reusable, I mean, for example, the rocket shown in the Helping JPL Test Precision Landing, the rocket's known as Zombie, it did 227 flights before we finally retired. There were times when we did 5 flights in a single day. We won the Lunar Lander Challenge in 2009 with a rocket called Zoe. Zoe wasn't quite as reusable as Zombie was. We pushed a little too hard on the technology for it, and so it had some difficulties, and we barely won. We spent the night before we did our final flight for the Lunar Lander Challenge. We spent that entire night, the entire company and a number of volunteers came by the shop, and we spent the entire night into the morning trying to rebuild the rocket after the previous flight had some issues. And we did. We got rebuilt, and we went out and we flew it. Did 2 flights, and as Kathy described, up, over, come down, and they had about the same performance and energy as would be necessary to actually land on the moon. So, yeah. So then from that, we were able to get on board with NASA, the Flight Opportunities Program. is a program that helps fund a lot of the JPL tests that we've done on our rockets now. That technology is going to Mars on the Mars 2020 mission that we tested. And it will allow them to actually get much closer to sites of scientific interest than they were with previous missions. The Curiosity rover had to drive something like a year to get to what their true science objective was. We expect that this time they'll have to drive for maybe a couple of weeks. So yeah, so we've been doing that over the course of the past 10 years. We've done over 600 flight operations with our vehicles, 5 vehicles, and then recently in 2015, we were selected by NASA to be one of the 3 companies to receive a bunch of assistance and help with developing an actual lunar lander to actually land on the moon, and that's part of the Lunar Catalyst program. And how that program works, well, yeah, it works. We're still in it. We've got a couple of extensions on it. But what it basically is a series of Space Act agreements with no funds exchanged, where NASA can commit a little bit of their time and an effort to do some things that they want to do anyway, but they don't really have a good excuse to do them, but they need to do them in the future. And use that to help us in developing our ability to actually land on the moon. And so that's been a great program. We've been developing a lander with that, and with that we came to a lander, and the artist's idea of what that looks like now is up there, and that is what got us onto the NASA Eclipse contract, which is the Commercial Lunar Payload Services contract. And what that is quite simple. It's 9 commercial providers, where programs 10 years, $2.6 billion over the 10-year period. Providers are responsible for doing everything. Build the lander, integrate the payloads, arrange the launch of the vehicle, and then actually fly the vehicle and land it on the moon. Operate the vehicle and the payloads for whatever period of time is necessary for the payloads, because some payloads, some of the payloads for the program that they've already announced actually just need to operate for a few minutes during the landing. Others want to last as long as they can on the surface. And basically, we're responsible for the entire thing. Each of the commercial providers is responsible for that entire thing. NASA is targeting 2 or more missions per year. The initial set of missions have already been awarded, and they awarded 3 of those, so there are 3 missions in 2021. And we're hoping we're going to be doing a couple more missions in 2022, but we want to select 2021 flights. And basically, a lot of this work is going to be used to not only get science returns to scientists, but also to better understand the science and technology necessary to support the Artemis program, which is bringing humans back to the moon. Along with that, we also recently won a contract to do some work to help build Artemis. We're actually doing some technology development and testing for propulsion systems that NASA expects to be using for the human return. As soon as they can. Wow, I just went through that way too quick.
Just that Artemis, people may not be familiar with, that is Apollo's twin in Greek mythology. So Apollo, God is the sun, and then Artemis was the twin. So that's why the new moon project's called the Artemis. It's the twin to Apollo. Thank you for sharing that.
So,
Are there any questions
yeah,
for Dave?
let's take questions.
So when you first started out, where did you get, it sounds like you were playing with a lot of toys. Where did you get funding for that?
So, like I said, we started off in Santa Clara. That's because I had golden handcuffs from a nice little company that got acquired. And this is not my first startup. Unfortunately, my first startup didn't do as well as Elon Musk's did.
How many employees do you have? How big an operation do you have here?
We are currently 15 people. One of the core premises to the company and how we work is that we keep the team small so that we don't spend all day in meetings trying to coordinate engineers to make sure that electrical connection and Ethernet connection aren't going to interfere.
Nobody knows how to hurt a guy.
It's like herding cats.
And it's just, that is a problem with any large program with large organizations. And I've encountered that so many times, from my service in the Army up to when we got, my previous startup got acquired, and I spent 2 years in a much larger company.
Decisions by committee
Yeah, it's decisions by committees, and it's bureaucracy, and Lord help you, had to go talk to the HR person.
There's a question.
Dave, can you talk about what kind of things you might anticipate doing on Artemis specifically? Is it hardware, software,
So
an
we're hoping
actual
to do
land?
lots of things on Artemis, but the way it's playing out right now, it looks like we'll probably end up doing a bit of hardware work with providing thrusters, potentially for the ascent vehicle, or get the astronauts back off the moon.
Okay.
Or actually, it might have something to do with the gateway itself and the refueling capability. There's another place that the technology we're working on will be applied. And considering that we'll see when they figure out and actually formulate what they're doing next with the sort of speeding things up. They're supposed to have an announcement early this month. Haven't seen it yet. We'll see what happens.
It's getting to be late this month. What kind of fuels did you use in Zoe and Zombie?
Zoe and Zombie use isopropyl alcohol and liquid oxygen. And one of the reasons we use that particular combination, liquid oxygen is really easy to obtain. They actually produce it at most large hospitals, and so it's fairly inexpensive, easy to obtain. Isopropyl alcohol, we use that because we saw a lot of problems with people testing standard kerosene, rocket RP1, rocket propulsion 1.
Little town, but it has the greatest airport, where you are free to fail even, and you learn so much more when you fail, and then you can go on and succeed, because the only way you truly fail is if you quit. So, yeah, so just keep pressing on, and you're doing a great job. Thanks, Dave, so much. Should I give everybody Vinny says we should take a pee break. If you want to take a pee break, you can. But I want to tell you that Vinny is a multifaceted guy. And the reason I first met him was I was contacted by someone that said, could we bring our British car clubs from Bakersfield, it was Vinny, to Plain Crazy Saturday? I said, that sounds really neat. Yeah, bring them on. And he has this gorgeous 1953 Jaguar XK120, and it's black, and it is outstanding. But then Bill, like, was it the little MG?
Yeah, I had an MGTD,
Yeah.
which I still have.
Or- Oh, okay. But anyway, they all lined up in front of the administration building, and they were such a big hit, and they've been here 2 or 3
Put your
times.
airplanes out there.
And yes, and the airplanes were all out there, so we've had classic cars, hot rods, and British cars. And my husband has some British tanks. We've got a Scorpion and an APC, but they have Jaguar engines, and so we're gonna join the club.
But can you put your top down?
Yeah, well, no, but we can turn the turret. So, anyway, but go ahead, if you want to take a little break, 10 minutes, come back, and Vinny's going to tell you about the Apollo program from Apollo 1. And the handout that he gave you is going to start out to be 10 pages, and I think it's a book.
It's a booklet, that's what the
It's
press.
a booklet
Nice
now.
swap.
Bless your heart for making
Wasn't
that.
mine.
But he wanted you to have that to kind of know what was, he was going to be talking about. And it's fabulous, and I want to thank Naomi Pruitt for giving me this poster. Isn't this cool? And on the back is this gorgeous picture of her.
Tranquility Base.
Isn't that something?
So maybe if I hold it up, you can take a picture. What do you
Big,
think?
the big blue marble.
Get your phones out, see if you can.
Yeah, isn't that something? Naomi, are you here?
I don't hear any clicks.
Oh, there she is, right in my
Where's
blind
Naomi?
spot, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Naomi. It's a gorgeous picture.
It is
So,
fabulous.
yeah,
fabulous.
please, during the break, take a few moments just to come up. I donated a lot of my memorabilia to Kathy and the museum here, and this is one of the things that I gave her, which is all the Apollo patches.
Nice.
So when you look at the Apollo guys, you'll see all the
Will
Apollo
that
patches.
show up?
Well,
Okay.
but before we take a break, I just want to take a moment of your time. Kathy just mentioned it's a small town in Mojave, but it has a great facility here. And I want to say not only that, but it has a great treasured asset. And that's Kathy Hansen and Al, her husband, and Bill, her other husband. Let's hear it. Unless it's for her, we all would be here.
No, the talk of the town, I've got
Absolutely.
husbands.
So when you get a chance, come on up, look over, and then when you come back, we'll sit down and decide what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, we've got,
See? We just manage our time, so you know. I'm not going to do a lot of talking or standing up here. I decided that one of the best things to do is spend my nights and not be with my wife and make up this thing, which is called Mission Creep. And I put together some videos, because as you know, there's a lot of stuff out there since you've all been looking at the 50th anniversary. So I actually put together 7 videos. I'm just going to read the titles and the length of time for each video so you have an idea of how to manage your time. So the first one is called Launch Complex 34. Dr. Kurt Debus, anybody know his name? Kurt Debus? Who was Kurt Debus?
He's one of the original Germans they brought over from Operation Paperclip,
Von Braun's right-hand man.
and he ran the
Launch operations.
launches. And I think if you watch Apollo 13, I think he portrayed.
You'll see him.
Yeah. Okay.
He'll tell you the whole story. So I picked that particular one because he does. It's a NASA video explaining. He is explaining because he was Launch Operations Center, and he was originally at Cape Kennedy, which brings me to explain. People think of it as one big Cape Kennedy. Here's Kennedy Space Center. Anybody been out there, by the way?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So you know, there's a Banana River and the India River, and it makes an island called Merritt Island. So that's where it used to be LOC, Launch Operations, but it became, when they renamed it, Kennedy Space Center, and the director became Dr. Kurt Debus. You'll know him because he has a big saber scar on the side of his face. So what was there was all the personnel who were the support administrative, there was no hardware there. All the hardware was out at the Air Force Station called Cape Canaveral. That's where all the stands and the blockhouses, all the hardware. And we were all out there. Those of us that were the launch support personnel that launched the astronauts were all out on the Cape, and you'll see all that stuff here. Launch Complex at its time was the largest launching site of its day. Now, this is a perfect segue, and I'm glad you went first. You know, because I'm thinking in my mind, why do we have him back there? The word is anachronistic. Has anyone ever heard that word? Anachronistic? Did you all? Shout out what it means. Old and not needed anymore. Very old. Anachronistic. So, you were born in 1968. What month?
August.
August. So that's a perfect segue because I was born 1 month before they opened the Golden Gate Bridge. Does anyone know when they opened the Golden Gate Bridge?
1936.
Not older than dirt, but older than the Golden Gate Bridge. I was born in April, hold on, 1937.
Oh, young.
So
They were built in 36.
that makes me 83 on my next birthday.
Huh? I'm almost 23.
Anyhow, I'm old enough to know what happened back then. Now, for those of you that may have looked through, on the last page, I designed this thing. So the last page happens to be my experience in aerospace. Will you quickly turn to that back page for a second? Just gives you a little idea of how I got into this. So somebody asked Dave, you know, did you choose to get into this? I don't know any. I know very few people that choose to do what they end up doing. I was minding my own business and got drafted into the Army. So they put me in missiles. So you'll read that in here. And after that, just
Well, the rest
anyhow,
is-
this is put on here purposely. I designed it this way so you can pull it out, throw it away. Still got nice logo. Perfect design.
I won't throw it away.
You're not taking it. So it says on here.
Oh,
It's the last copy.
You're right, okay.
It's the last copy. However, just so you all know, if you want more copies of this document,
I have the master.
I bequeath all the originals over to Kathy so she can have more made. It got to the point where I was so over budget, I decided to cut it off at 50.
Oh my God.
Zero. Okay, so anyhow, that's what that is. So you're all clear now that launch support personnel were out on the Cape, and the administrative personnel where Kurt Debus was the head, was in there. So I'm going to go over these videos. Launch Complex 34 is 16 minutes, but it's well worth it. Kurt Debus himself explaining everything and explaining the rockets and the launch complex. And so I laid the booklet out to go along with these videos. So if you want, you get a chance, at them on a video, you can skip through that. So the next one is Launch 34. Launch Complex 34, then and now, and it's very short, it's only 3 minutes. And the reason I did that, those of you that were out at Cape Kennedy, did you go to Launch Complex 34? Who went out there?
Was on the bus
So you-
tour.
So you know there's just this launch pedestal, and then there's a couple of plaques, bronze plaque, and a plastic, clear plastic plaque. And it is a historic site. So this will tell you about that. So for those of you that want to go there, they do have a tour that you can take at the Kennedy Space Center called Then and Now. So this is a piece of video from that. The next one is Apollo 1, and it's 2 minutes and about 10 seconds, and that is narrated by Frank Borman. Is that name kind of familiar?
Yeah.
Colonel Borman.
Colonel Borman, when he got out of the program, do you know what he did for a living?
Ran Eastern Airlines for a
CEO
while.
of Eastern Airlines.
And you ran them down.
Was he an
Did you
owner?
know that?
Yeah.
No, he was president
Okay,
of
so
it.
the next one is called Apollo 7. It's narrated by Walter Cunningham and Wally Schirra, and that's 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Apollo 8 is narrated by Bill Anders. He's the famous photographer now who took the picture with Rise. And Jim Lovell, that's 3 minutes, 40 seconds. Next one is Apollo 11. Now, you've all seen it, so I didn't go through putting in this whole big thing about Apollo 11. This is actually a 5-minute clip, and it's narrated by ABC's David Curley. And it talks about the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11. And they actually had the excerpts of the original ABC coverage, but they kept it short. And remember last night I was putting this together at like 10 o'clock.
Oh my God.
And the computer died, so.
Oh, I'm
So,
sorry.
okay, so Apollo 11, the 5th anniversary, is narrated. It's only 2 minutes and 40 seconds, but I wanted to put that in there because it's an interview with Buzz Aldrin,
Yeah.
you know, so, as you know, he's the second guy that stepped down from the lunar excursion module, which I want to acknowledge at this moment. I didn't think of. My oldest brother, Louis, worked out at Lockheed. He worked for Grumman out on Long Island. We're from Queens, New York. And he helped design the S-band communication system when they did EVAs, when they were walking around. So I want to acknowledge Louis Charles Apicella because he's passed on, and my oldest brother Louis, who inspired me the work that he did. So thanks, Lou.
Vinny is a fabulous cook, too. But of course he would be. And who taught you to cook? Your mom?
Mama was from Italy,
Yes.
an immigrant from Italy.
And who taught you to dance?
Fred Astaire and June Taylor.
Ah,
I worked for them.
really?
When I said I got drafted, I was an entertainer in Miami Beach, and I got drafted. So I went from doing entertaining to rocket science, literally rocket science. I didn't put it in there, but I have a couple of advanced degrees in science, computer science. So, so now, by a raise of hand, I'm going to do this fast. Who all knows the names of Apollo 11 prime crew? You all know it? Just raise your hand. That's good. Okay. How many people know all the names of the prime crew on Apollo 8, where they took the picture and read the Bible? You know Jim Lovell and Bill Anderson. Okay, so if you need to know their names are up here. How many people know the names of the prime crew that were Apollo 1 that were in the fire? You all know those? Okay, now my focus today is to do what Rodney Dangerfield used to say, I don't get any respect. Apollo 7. How many people know the name of the crew on Apollo 7? Look around. So my intention is that when you leave today, and someone says who was on Apollo 7, you'll know their names. Because they are truly, I mean, we honor the guys and they did a great job, right? Buzz Aldrin. But you know who the real heroes were? First of all was Gus Grissom and Jen. They died in the fire. They were the first. But think about this, especially you pilots. So, who's Apollo 7? We know the astronauts, right? Don Isley, Walter Cunningham, Wally Schirra. Think about it. They're in their spacesuits, laying down in this brand new capsule. It took 20 months to design a brand new capsule. And we had the fire. I was there. They collected our engineering notebooks. And for 20 months, we suspended the program. Think about it. You're laying there, and here you are on this rocket, and they had a big fire. The guys, your buddies, died. And now you're sitting on top of this thing. You don't know if it's going to go up or not. And you know, you have to be 3 miles away to watch the launches. Anyhow, I thought about that, and I thought, oh my God, these are the real heroes. I don't want to take away anything from anybody, but think about yourself in their position, the real pioneers. If it wasn't for Apollo 7, Neil Armstrong would not have left his footprint on the surface of the Earth. Just let that sink in for a second. I want to make sure we're clear about that. Those guys went around the Earth. There were 2 basic missions. Everybody thinks it was one mission, the moon program. This part of the moon program is called the Earth Orbit Mission. And Chrysler Space Division had the contract to build the booster, the S-1B, the S-1s and the S-1Bs. And they were a derivative from the Redstone Army rocket. And the upgraded Redstone Army rocket called the Jupiter and the Jupiter C. And I worked on those at Redstone Arsenal. You'll see that in the CV. So here these 3 guys are sitting waiting for this thing. And so if it wasn't for them doing all the checkouts, they went around almost 11 times, hundreds of revolutions, checking out old equipment, and Dave can really appreciate that. You don't check out the equipment, they're not going anywhere. So just know Apollo 7, which gets no respect, and I clearly in all the research I've done to do this booklet, you hardly ever hear anything about Apollo 7, the news, everything, but you hear about the fire, you hear about Earthrise, the picture, and reading the Bible, and you hear about the guy stepping on the moon. How about all the other guys that worked on those things? So anyhow, we'll leave it there. The video, what I mentioned here, made a note. So after the videos are done, you can leave if you want, or we can stay around and have a discussion for any of you that want to know some specific things or some of the tales and stories. One thing I like to let people know is those of us that were on the launch support team that actually worked with the astronauts, we don't really lie, but once in a while we get reckless with the truth about what happened. And the last thing is I will stand over by that door, and for those of you that want bragging rights to vicariously have shaked hands with Buzz Aldrin and Wally and Jim Irwin and Edgar Mitchell, I will shake your hand. And when you leave, you can say, you know what, I shook the hand of Buzz Aldrin. So, with that, I'll start some of the videos. Oh, I know what else I wanted to say. I mentioned my mom is an immigrant because, you know, it's in the news a lot. Think about it. My mom came over here in 1904. She was 4 years old with her sisters and her mom on a sailing ship and then stayed in New York much for a minute. She had 8 children, 7 boys and 1 girl. And all of this immigrant 7 sons all served this country and fought for our flag. All 7. That's a hell of a record. So Rose, de Gasper, Apicella, I honor you, Mom, for contributing to this country. So there you have it. Okay. Where's my...
Oh, there it is. Of course, it doesn't come down where you want it. I have a spider chasing first.
I'm David Kirtley at the Smithsonian Air and Space
We don't
Museum.
have one yet? Oh, I know why that's because. That's because I queued it up to have that 50 banner up there. Here.
Oh, glad you know.
Go.
I see.
Last night I did not. I tried to copy them into my video file.
This is Launch Complex 34 at Cape Canaveral, Florida. The size and complexity of the launch facilities for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration space program can best be explained by the man responsible for their design, construction, and operation, Dr. Kurt H. Debus, Director of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration Launch Operations Center at Cape Canaveral, Florida.
The majority of the rocket systems developed for military use have completed their research and development phase and are ready for their deployment and intended use. Some of these systems have been used by the NASA for the scientific exploration of space and are launched from Cape Canaveral. Actually, the space program of the United States had its beginnings with some of the military boosters. I would like to show you some of the models used in the scientific exploration in order to come to a comparison with the newest booster, the Saturn C1. Then I would like to show you the launch facilities required and developed for the Saturn C1. Beginning with the first satellite of the United States, the modified Redstone booster was used. Here is a scale model of that configuration. Using a modified Jupiter booster, other satellites were placed in orbit, including the Pioneer 4, which is in orbit around the Sun. Here are the modified boosters of the Redstone and the Atlas type, the latter one being used with the Mercury configuration in the current series of the U.S. man-in-orbit studies. This is a model of the Saturn C1, which is presently under design and engineering for the NASA. The model is made to the same scale as the models for the other space configurations. This increase in size, which is approximately, as you can see, double the size of the former space configurations, had to be taken into consideration for the concept and the design of the launch facilities. Permit me to use here a model of Launch Complex 34. The main elements of the Saturn C1 complex are the launch pad, which is approximately 120 meters in diameter. In the center is a launch table. 360 meters away is a blockhouse, which is a launch control center or the nerve center of the operations. This particular control center is igloo-shaped and contains 2 floors. The lower floor contains a telemeter station. The upper floor is a control center itself with all panels and instruments vital to the checkout and launch. Other elements of the 40-acre complex are the facilities for storage and automatic fuel transfer of liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen, fuel and the transfer lines, as well as a high-pressure storage area necessary for the fueling of the space vehicle before launch. The most noticeable element is that of the service tower, which in servicing position straddles the space vehicle. The service tower is used to assemble, service, and shelter the space vehicle during preparation of the rocket for launch. After its job is completed, it is moved under its own power approximately 182 meters back to a parking position. This is considered to be the minimum distance in order to protect the tower from an explosion caused by a space vehicle falling back onto the pad. The design and construction of this tower was an engineering task and challenge of the first order. It is self-propelled, weighs almost 3,000 tons, is built to withstand hurricane winds of 125 knots, and this point is 31 stories above the ground. From here, you can get a good view of the various elements I described to you on the model. Incidentally, in the background are the launch pads used in the other programs at the Cape. Now let's look at Complex 34 and see it in operation.
This is the NASA symbol. Its likeness will no doubt appear on vehicles and hardware used in America's manned lunar landing program, which will be launched from a site here at Cape Canaveral, Florida. Beyond this gate is Complex 34, the largest known launching site in the world, and the first built expressly for the peaceful exploration of space. The dome-shaped structure in the foreground is the Launch Control Center, with 10,000 square feet of protected floor space on 2 levels and designed to withstand tremendous blast pressure. The 43-foot diameter spherical tank is for storage of liquid oxygen and in reality is a giant thermos bottle. Electrical, pneumatic, and hydraulic services are provided through lines on this 240-foot high umbilical tower. A 3-story pedestal supports and retains the vehicle during checkout and launch operations. The donut-shaped torus ring around the center opening is part of the water deluge system. High-pressure helium is stored in these cylindrical bottles. Helium is used for bubbling the liquid oxygen tanks of the booster to keep the liquid oxygen from forming into layers of different temperatures. The movable service structure is 310 feet high. It is used to erect and check out the vehicle. 10 days and 2,000 miles of water travel brings the Saturn barge to a dock at Cape Canaveral. The docking procedure is the final task of the barge and tug crews. Comparison of booster size can now be made. It is 82 feet long and 21½ feet in diameter. At dusk, the Saturn booster is making its last earthbound trip. Destination, Complex 34, some 2 miles away. The booster will remain on the transporter overnight and be erected the following day. Other stages have remained on the barge overnight. Work begins on their removal. Sheathed in a blue plastic protective covering is the second stage. The water ballast tank and nose cone are also covered for protection against dirt and dust. A slow but steady 2-mile trip begins for the transporter crews. The caravan passes through the gate at Complex 34, preceded by guards in the station wagon. The Saturn service structure dominates the skyline. Booster stage erection has begun. The stage is lifted by an overhead crane located at the top of the service structure. We can see the 8 H1 engines clearly. The inner 4 engines are fixed in position, while the outer 4 engines are movable to provide directional control during the powered flight. Lowering the booster onto the pedestal is the first assembly operation. The booster rests on 8 steel arms, 4 to support the vehicle, and 4 to both support and restrain the vehicle until proper engine ignition has been achieved. Technicians remove the plastic sheath. The second stage is then hoisted by the crane prior to being mated to the booster. The whole process is like a construction worker laying blocks. Another step in this block laying procedure is to hoist the nose cone section to the top of the service structure. The nose cone cradle transporter is moved away from the immediate launch area. An explanation and briefing on Saturn erection procedures takes place at the base of the service structure. While high in the service structure, work progresses in lowering the third stage onto the second. Final assembly is complete. Now the long and complicated checkout begins to determine Saturn's readiness to perform its intended function. This requires varied forms of communication between the many teams working toward the common goal of a successful flight. The assembly of the various stages has created the final configuration known as Saturn C1, which stands majestically while surrounded by the steel network of the service structure. Preparation for fueling begins. Nitrogen supplies the necessary gas for purging fuel lines, liquid oxygen lines, and the engine and instrument compartments. Liquid oxygen is manufactured on the Cape and is stored in this spherical ground storage tank, seen here venting. In order to expedite work at the various levels, 5 movable work platforms are positioned around the vehicle. These are sectionalized and positioned in the horizontal plane. Repositioning can be accomplished to place the platforms at various vertical levels. Activities continue in other areas of the complex. Inside the Launch Control Center, the test conductor and his part of the team continue the countdown. The complexity of this operation can best be understood by noting the myriad of instruments and equipment required in support of the Saturn program. The analog system presently in use will be phased out, and analog to digital conversions will be used at future launch sites. Specialized launch operations require specialized skills and equipment. Dr. Debus and his Launch Control Center personnel keep in visual contact with outside activities through a closed-circuit television system. From the Launch Control Center, heart of this giant complex, the scene shifts to the giant vehicle being prepared for launch. What might appear to be the columns of an ancient civilization is in reality a modern system of supports for the liquid oxygen lines installed above ground, from the storage tank to the vehicle. Expansion loops in the lines allow for rapid expansion and contraction of liquids at extremely low temperatures. From the indicated time, ignition of the engines, followed by liftoff of the vehicle, will soon occur. After ignition, the 4 hold-down arms are retracted to release the vehicle for flight. Tracking cameras located about 2 miles from the launch area provide coverage from ignition through flight, culminating in the high water experiment. 1,300,000 pounds of thrust, generated by Saturn's 8 engines, accelerate the vehicle to the upper atmosphere. Maximum speed attained by the vehicle was 3,700 miles per hour. Inboard engine cutoff came at 110 seconds following launch. Outboard engine cutoff was achieved at 116 seconds after liftoff. The flight was a complete success, with all objectives attained, including determination of the in-flight performance of the 8 booster engines, the controlling movements of the 4 gimbaled engines, engine cutoff, and propellant utilization. Also achieved were verification of the airframe structural integrity, a further proving of the launch facilities and ground support equipment. A cloud cover partially obscures the vehicle, but the trailing tail of flame is easily seen entering the rarefied atmosphere where the vapor trail appears. The vehicle was deliberately destroyed at an altitude of 65 miles to release the 95 tons of water, which was carried as ballast in the dummy upper stages. An ice cloud with a diameter of 8 to 10 miles was formed within 3 seconds. This is the highest ice cloud ever known to have existed.
There you have a short glimpse of the size and the complexity of the launch facilities and launch operations as they are required for the launch of a C-1 space vehicle. If we take a view at the total space program that the United States of America plans, it becomes immediately apparent that the launch complexes and operation concepts that you have seen for the Saturn C-1 vehicle have severe limitations. For the next generation vehicle, it becomes necessary and mandatory to develop a new launch concept, but this is a story in itself. Some of the problems and the totality of the problems that have to be resolved may become apparent to you if you compare a model Saturn C-1 vehicle, as you see it here, with the same scale model of a Saturn C-5 vehicle as it will be used in the manned exploration of the moon.
You can go on YouTube,
Yeah.
find them.
And there's been quite a few on the different major channels. We watched one the night before last. I think it was on CBS.
Yeah.
That series.
Walter Cronkite. Yeah. It sure brought back a lot of memories. Anybody have any questions for Vinny?
My understanding, and I'm just trying to find out whether it happened or not. My grandfather said that at least on one of the missions, during the landing, they were taking stereo.
said earlier. It's not lying, I might be getting reckless with the truth, I don't know, but they may have. You know, technology was really so advanced. I remember doing research at Kennedy Space Center Library for lithium-cadmium batteries for the lunar rover vehicle, and that's in the 60s. You're now using lithium and cadmium for batteries. So, you know, they're always 15, 14.
See you later, bud.
Get a new kid on the block.
But, you know,
I just want to thank everybody for anybody that's leaving. I'm more than happy to hang around and share any experiences I have or anything you may see in the hot off the press booklet you have there that you might have questions about. I'll just hang around. I have nothing else to do. I'm here visiting our house in Tehachapi. My wife's in Vandenberg Village in Lompoc, so I'm free for the weekend.
well, Al and I visited Colorado Springs and went to a space symposium. Got to see Edward Teller and Carl Sagan there. And I was just so excited to meet Edward Teller. But they had in the lobby all the spin-offs that we use every day in the space program. And people just don't realize, everything that
That computer I worked on helped launch those guys.
Yeah.
I had this back then.
Well, and our cordless drills are
Everything.
even
Corningware from the ablative shield on the capsule.
exactly.
All the Corningware products.
And they had a
That
guitar
ablative
there,
shield.
and I'm thinking, why do they have a guitar? But the materials that it's made out of now is from the space program, and it has the microwave. I mean, there's just so many things, and people say, "Oh, we wasted all that money going to." We didn't waste a dime. It was just a fabulous program, but it has made our lives so much better in just little things that we don't even think about because of the space program. And I'm grateful that I was alive to see it. And I'm sorry Dave wasn't. But now he's doing his own thing. How large is your moon lander going to be?
We actually have 3 different moonlanders in design. The first one that we're hoping to land is about 14 foot long, 10 foot high, and 12 to 13 foot wide.
A little taller and a little wider than a car, but about the same
Well,
thing.
about the size of a typical apartment bedroom.
Yeah. That's, yeah, that is.
That's a direct, as you were just saying, that's a direct outcome of what we did with that, because the research was necessary.
That's right.
Think about all the thousands of contractors. You know how it is to get along with people, right? Thousands and thousands of contractors had to all work together. And they were making it up as they went along, right? A lot of that stuff. You know, they had to decide between 3 different approaches. You know this one well, right? Do you do Earth rendezvous? Do you do a direct launch? Or do you do lunar rendezvous? They finally decided on lunar rendezvous. And that's what became the program. This all just happened in the early 60s, and then Kennedy happens to say what he said. Really put it on the map.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Kathy?
Yes.
Now, you talk about the spin-off from the space program.
Right.
You know, microwaves, pacemakers, all of those things as a result of that. Dave, what do you think is going to be the result of your stuff now?
It's hard to say. I mean, that's the thing. That's the thing when you're developing technology. You think in 1980, Steve Jobs had any idea that the iPhone would be what he's known for?
Yeah.
Right.
Really.
You know, there's no way.
We're gonna make friends with the green people.
Yes. Christy.
Yeah, so I mean, right now we're at the very beginning of a whole new revolution. So G5 we're just at the very beginning of what is going to be created now to get us to the moon and to actually stay there. We can't even imagine what 50 years from now, what all of this is gonna.
Has anyone heard of nanobots? BOTS?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay. And of course, as you're seeing more and more is VR, virtual reality. And these disciplines are all coming together synergistically. And there will be an avatar that looks like you. There will be your pet robot. There's a guy already working on this, and he designed his own robot, and you know how they do with the plastic, you know, what they can do with putting, you know, your 3D wireframe and make a person out of him. He's already got his own avatar, and he talks to it on his TV screen.
Oh,
Now, some would say that's a virtual of what's already a virtual reality.
Yeah, well, that's old. That's old. But you can go online and ask for, you know, what's the future hold, and the different interdisciplinary types of projects that they work.
if you ever have the opportunity to take a tour of JPL, be sure and do that. Because their
The Pasadena.
yeah, nanotechnology lab is amazing.
And you don't have to go down there, you can go on a virtual tour.
That's true. But it is fun to talk with the people and do that. So, yes.
When Isley and Cunningham Chirag got sick together, how long did it take them collectively to basically start feeling better?
I'm glad you brought that up. You know that all three of the astronauts got colds on Apollo 8. And they talked about mutiny, well, Wally Schirra, Apollo 7, thank you. And they had difficulty with getting them to do what they wanted to. And he was complaining about the pressure on his nose and his face. Can you imagine having, you know how your sinuses get?
Oh, yeah.
And these guys had this little can flying around the earth, having a cold, and having to blow your nose. And what does that do to your eardrums?
Oh.
You know, you don't hear about stuff like that, but, you know, and they were trying to talk to Capcom back and forth over communications. And it's hard enough when your ears are clogged up to hear what's going on, right? And you remember they had their first video where you saw it. So, I don't know how long it took, but you can read about it. You can just Google
By
it.
comparison to what we experienced, those guys had real clearance problems. I mean, they didn't have gravity to help their natural.
Yeah.
I remember back in the day, there was actually a television commercial for Actifed.
Oh, that's right.
And
That's right.
Wally Schirra was on there
Thank you
going
very
like,
much for
man,
saying
if I
that. That's
didn't have
true.
this stuff, I would have been screwed.
That's true. Thank you very much for bringing that up. That's
He
part of
actually
the
got
trivia.
fired after that.
Yeah, a little side note behind the scenes.
Yes.
I want to give a Plain Crazy Saturday hat to Vinny.
Oh.
Come get your hat. I hope somebody can take a picture and send it to me.
Can you autograph it for me?
Where's your camera?
Add it to my collection.
Yeah, maybe, anyway, maybe John can get a picture.
Yeah, I got it.
Send it to me. Thanks.
Good.
I need to,
Got it?
yeah, need to get out on the ramp and get a picture of that beautiful little pits. Does somebody in here fly in?
Oh, I think I saw it take off already.
Oh, shoot. Oh, it was a pretty little thing.
Yes.
Yeah, it's nice.
Any other questions, comments, observations, anything you want to share with the group?
Just, I was watching Air Force Brat, and we were stationed at Shaw in South Carolina, and I was 12. My folks did not want me to stay up, you know, because they landed at like 11 o'clock, and that's past my bedtime.
Yeah.
So I took a stocking cap and, you know, one of those old wind-up alarm clocks that you could fold up. Stuck it right here next to my ear with the watch cap on, and I had it set to go off 15 minutes before the landing. So I got up, cranked on the TV, and it took 5 minutes for it to warm up. It was an old Heath kit my dad built, and you know, just in time to watch them land and to actually get out. And then I think I went and spent the night out on the porch in the Chase Lounge, just staring at the moon, going like, oh my God, I can't believe there's men up there. You know, that's stuck with me for the rest.
You've seen the viewing stand, so the viewing stands are 3 miles.
Yeah.
Very. When we're all back, everybody, visitors, you know, the staff, the support group, you know, and they'd start lifting up and you could just see everybody trying to push it as it goes. And I would say to my partner who was responsible for Launch Complex 37, I was 34, and I'd say, you know, I have an engineering change order, I don't think I closed it out yet. I don't understand how that thing. It's like,
Yeah, exactly.
But of course, it's very thrilling to have been part of that. And you know, people say, well, what did it feel like to know you were part? I said, I didn't. I went to work in the morning, right? I said, all this stuff is later on. You go to work in the morning, right? You go to school at night. You know, I was very busy, so I didn't think about anything other than I got a system and I get working. And part of, as you read in the last page on that handout, you'll see that I was responsible for writing a lot of the procedures to bring the computer online and readiness, and then abort. You know, what's the procedure for aborting?
Yeah.
And writing, when I worked in Huntsville, my job right out of the Army was to write the manuals to upgrade from, I gotta be politically correct, we don't say manned and unmanned. Do you know what the new phraseology is? Crude and uncrewed. C-R-E-W, not the other crude. Crude and uncrewed because we have female astronauts. So you can't say manned and unmanned.
Ridiculous.
But I wrote the manuals to upgrade. You saw the strip jockey cores and all that. There's a plaque up here. It'll tell you all of the launches that Price was responsible for. Well, all the ones that had nothing to do with people on it. They used water as a payload. You know, we were using people, and so we had to upgrade the manual for LOX, liquid hydrogen, and RP1, or as he said, rocket propellant 1, which is kerosene, basically kerosene. And think about it, right? Your boss says, we need to upgrade because we're going to have manned flight, and you have to write the manuals with the new NASA logo. The biggest challenge I had was trying to figure out how thick to make the binder and to have them silk screen the new NASA logo. You know, you had to do this 3 or 4 months before, trying to figure that out. Well, I don't know how many pages it's going to be. So little stuff, but anyhow, I wrote those manuals in Huntsville, and they were shipped down to the Cape, and then when I went down to the Cape, they were using the manuals in there.
Wow.
So that was kind of cheating.
Yeah.
Especially since I was an entertainer.
I know, here we are, an entertainer. Thank you, Denny. I really appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you all for coming. I hope there's still some airplanes out there to look at. And I'm sorry Dave couldn't bring some of his rockets over for you. We'll invade his place sometime.
Now I can say I shook hands with Bud all over.